Welcome.
Hi.
Hello. You guys, every time I do that, you guys don't see how fast I shift my head attentively to the person who's talking. What are we talking about today?
Things.
We're talking about our new house.
Why would you tell them that? They're doing good in life. Let's stop listening to them now.
We're talking about psychology, I suppose.
You're right. I'd say, Ben, we always have like a kind of a, I guess you can call it like a pile of topics. And this one is from the head of Ben. And I kind of want him to say it and kind of how he came about thinking of it, if he even remembered. I think that would kind of serve as the best intro.
Yeah, so the idea was talk about if you own your sport or if your sport owns you. And I think it developed from a few things. One of them being having felt owned by the sport or sports, I guess, in the past or even recent future. And also, I think the operations of how, potentially sports are run in general, but also watching the transition of, I think, powerlifting be run from backyard-esque style meets to now legitimate business operations. It almost seems like there's obviously money flowing with the way powerlifting meets are accruing lifters and everything. So I think, I guess those were the two lenses I was looking at it through that made me think of it.
And then, like, of course, as the sport grows and gets more competitive, like you said, from just kind of a fun small backyard thing to a lot being on the table, for some of these big meets and placings, you naturally get more serious. Like, people start taking them more serious and they start dedicating more time. And I guess through the dedication of more time, you start to create an investment that, in a way, you are that investment. You encompass that time totally, entirely, to some degree. I actually had a question that I kind of wanted to start it off on, and I was thinking, so like the NBA finals are on right now, and I was looking at Steph Curry, and I was like, man, if Steph Curry was like, hey kids, like, you want to be like me, you got to shoot for 6 hours a day, that would sound pretty reasonable because he's Steph Curry. Then I thought, what if someone who doesn't compete in anything was like, yeah, I train 6 hours a day? You would instantly be like, you're fucking crazy. Like, why are you training 6 hours a day? So, like, what is the difference between these two people? Like, why can't... So, Steph Curry, obviously, if you're shooting 6 hours a day, that thing owns you. But it's okay for him. So, why for a person that, I guess, is more in our realm of fitness, where you may not be competing or you may not be receiving what he's getting, like, why can't we let a sport own us entirely all day in the same way?
I guess societally we don't get that much back. So people are going to look at Steph Curry and say, well, it's okay if he practices basketball 6 hours a day because he's getting very well compensated for that. You might look at somebody powerlifting who trains 6 hours a day and say, one, people are probably going to say, you're training too much, you're going to hurt yourself. And two, what are you getting out of that?
Yeah.
I think it's part financial, obviously, and I think it's part kind of like Jake talked about, societally acceptable. Like, it's funny because you could look at something like cycling, which a lot of people do, but it's not really an accepted norm sport, and then something like basketball. Both are physical activity, but one of them is it's just accepted. Like, you could say I play basketball for a career, but if you say I ride bikes for a career, it's confusing to people. So it's kind of the same thing with lifting is, but I mean, there's obviously multiple places that can fork down just that general question to start with. But I think something else that came into my head too is that I've thought about something similar to that, and it's a dangerous promise to make somebody, because So if Steph Curry says that as his advice, he's telling millions of kids who follow Steph Curry, and the probability is a few of those kids might turn out to be NBA players. But how about the millions who don't? It's shit advice because they don't have the potential of Steph Curry. So if you tell, and I thought I'm sorry, I'm taking it way off the track.
No, it's good.
I thought about this with programming myself in my own head. I was thinking, man, a lot of people, it seems like almost an inevitable outcome of powerlifting is to get hurt. Like high-level powerlifting is to get hurt. And actually, Louis Simmons has talked about this at length. Like, that's just part of the game, basically. And then I started thinking about Bulgarian, and I forget what the Bulgarian coach's name was, with the maxing every day, and I should really know this. But anyway, the point is that people were weeded out who couldn't make it. Like, basically everybody pretty much did the protocol. If you couldn't make it, you were not an Olympic contender. If you could, you were a top level. And they obviously did very well. Otherwise it would be called some other country's training system, not Bulgarian. Right. And I started thinking, man, the thing to do right now is powerlifting. Like, that's the popular thing to do. So people of all different anatomical structures, all different athletic potentials, all different muscular, phenotypes are getting into it, and they all want to believe that dream of, like, if I train 6 hours a day, if I train 4 hours a day, if I train 5 days a week. But that might be one endpoint they're not looking at, is like on that other end of the spectrum can be some long-term destruction, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it's much different. It's much different than shooting a basketball from the free throw line. You can do that probably for 30 years straight without getting repetitive use injury.
Very low intensity activity.
True, but in other sports there is also a very high rate of injury.
It's right, because you're going super high intensity and anything that you do at that, you sustain that high intensity of a thing, obviously the risk for injury increases. I think my fundamental point that I kind of got off of a little bit is just that everybody kind of wants to be a champion who competes. I don't really know anybody, maybe some people say they compete just to do it, but everybody wants to do better than they want to win when they're competing.
Yeah.
And I think that oftentimes there's some element of, if I just do this, or if I just find that one next answer, that's going to solve the reality of maybe, let's say, my lack of genetic predisposition.
Right. And I was, it's funny, as I listened to that, I was actually thinking about powerlifting in itself, and kind of when I say the word ownership, I'm thinking of it in the, not the very proud capitalist, like I bought a home and I own it and I can afford it. I'm thinking like, no, you are owned and you're a slave to it. Like, you have now become a slave to what you claim you own.
Right. So I think this could also be phrased as like, does your sport empower you, or does it make you
destroy you,
or does it make you feel powerless?
Yeah.
I was just gonna say something and I forgot. But along the lines, I think, of what Ben was saying, I think expectations are very important, and I think you can get kind of caught in that like web of being controlled if your expectations are perhaps not pragmatic, and you're just continually like looking for that answer. And also when, I guess, your happiness or mood is dependent upon that answer, or your performance in the sport.
Yep.
I think then you become like a truly owned by it.
So I'm here. I'm starting to think there's a lot of issues with this. I guess the clarity of at least powerlifting or bodybuilding or fitness figure or any physique sport that's a non-Olympic sport, I guess, to some degree, or power sport. And you don't see this in Olympic weightlifting, and I realize why is because they have a structure. We have a lot of blurred lines, and we've talked about this before, and kind of like qualifying for the next round, same thing with Bulgarian.
I just keep hearing that song. As soon as you said, I know you want it.
So I literally have written down blurred lines. So here's what I have written down. I have a little list. I have in our sport. Here's where I think some issues are. We have blurred lines of sexuality, kind of like your attraction, not necessarily like actual sex, but your attraction. You know, you look better when you lift weights. It plays into your confidence. Like you feel good after a session, and you look better when you go out and you can show some upper chest. You know, it's a sport too, so a lot of people are competitive. And I think it just kind of ties into like that and it holds a whole identity. It's easy to say, oh, well, I didn't make the grades out of high school and there. And I think here there's this blurred line of this sort of, at the top you see two people, at least I do in powerlifting. I see, I guess I'll lump myself in there. I see me, I see Ray Williams, I see Kim Walford, I see these people, or Blaine Sumner. I see these people who train hard, but they really don't. I mean, I'm not knocking their training, but it's nothing compared to a guy like Lane. Nothing at all.
Right.
And it's clear at the top who is like the genetic, like they're dedicated, but they're just kind of.
It's kind of a hobby.
Yeah. Right. And then you have the other side of the guy like Lane. I can use Lane. He's my friend who says, well, I shouldn't be with the elite, but I am. And that side is the side that I see sort of letting them own you. So like, it's like, okay, well, I can be an underdog too. Yep. And so you don't ever get cut out in regional qualifier. You don't ever get cut out in NCAAs or anything like that. So there's this blurred line of, well, if I just keep going, like you said, I keep looking for that answer. If I keep pushing for more, and if I keep pushing for more, I never quit and I never give up. And go 6 hours a day, because Steph Curry says I got to go 6 hours a day lifting weights. I don't know if Steph Curry would actually say that, but it seems to get into the reverse role of, I guess, where you start to get a diminishing marginal return as opposed to actually getting like some positive in life from the activity that you were doing previously.
I think I think it's a great story though, and that's
love our stories.
That's what makes it, it catches a lot of momentum. Is obviously, everybody likes, I guess, the underdog story. But there was, I don't remember the study. This is a couple years ago now. Someone referenced it, but basically it was talking about trainability, and it had a different segment of different, tiers of athletes, and basically it's like the low potential, low genetic predisposition with proper training, and then it went all the way up to like high genetic predisposition. And obviously, high genetic predisposition, high level, sophisticated training came out the best. But if you think about it, I think what we're starting to see is this, I guess, shift now where a lot of even the past high-level athletes need to get to more sophisticated trainings.
Absolutely.
Because the trend line is moving forward of performance. So it's not just like I could kind of chill and stay here at the top. There's definitely a wave that's happening,
and it's not saturated yet. Like the NFL has all the highest elite level of talent, and they're training at the highest level, and we're sort of still in between. Like we have some high talent who doesn't have to. It's like
3 p.m. at the strip club, right?
dollar lap dance.
It's getting later though. It's
right. It's almost you know. Daylight savings
almost
time.
Rush hour. So yeah, I think it's interesting because I guess we probably all at this table have slightly different perspectives, and the way I look at it has now shifted much further away from my own, I guess, athletic performance and more towards, okay, there seems to be this trend of like, as you say, like people like Lane, who have done really well, but there's also this trend of increasing injuries, and admittedly, like I've seen it firsthand, you know, with people that I've worked with, is like, okay, we can really get a lot of performance out of people, but obviously you're riding this fence constantly.
Right.
And the question to me is like, is this just something that has to be accepted, or as just kind of the casualty of the sport to some degree? Because it's like you could literally have spent 40 years analyzing if Kobe would have tore his ACL at that specific moment or not. So is it just something, again, like you said, is directly related to the intensity and the competing frequently and the wanting to do high level meets constantly? Or is it can we find as Dr. Zordos always talks about, you know, can we find an optimum? Or I guess he kind of argues the counter if there is no optimum. Anyway, that was just a thinking out loud thing. Is it's an obsessive thought that may never be answered, but I guess that's the new search, is like, how can we both satisfy this for people who want to perform high, but also negate risk of injury as much as possible? And it seems like a very difficult equation, I suppose.
I guess patience probably, but if everybody's getting so much better at that rate, then
exactly,
that's
it breeds
not really,
impatience.
Nobody's gonna really want that answer, so you're kind of screwed.
And if you say to somebody, in 5 years I might be able to get you on the podium, or I could get you on the podium this year, but we'll increase risk of injury, a lot of people are gonna be like, get me on the podium this year, I'll take the risk.
Yeah. So I guess I kind of wanted to move back toward like the original question. Do you feel?
I do that.
Yeah. Do you feel like the sport, you control your sport, or the sport controls you? And so, one, I think if we're defining it as sport, I think that kind of raises it to a level of seriousness. So like, if we're saying sport, it's not hobby anymore.
Right.
So
yeah.
we already had like a whole podcast about that. So we're not even talking about that discrepancy anymore. Like, if we're saying sport, like we're assuming you're taking this seriously and you're competing to win. So let's take that into consideration. One thing that people are always going to say, regardless of if it's sport or not, is that if you feel like something's controlling you or whatever, is that, well, at the end of the day, it's your choice. You can do it. You don't have to do this. You don't have to do this. And I like to try to think of that in a light of like, for some people, is it a choice? Like at this point, and Ryan mentioned earlier, like level of investment, like, is it still in your life realistically a choice to stop doing it? And I think for a lot of athletes in other sports where that's how they make money, is it a choice to just stop playing anymore? Now that they've invested all of their time and skill into doing that, and they haven't really developed many other skills. And that may not be the case for a lot of power lifters, but I think some. Mm-hmm. And I think it comes down again to, it can be a financial thing. And it can be both direct and indirect. So direct, I'm not saying like people are in powerlifting are making that much money off of like sponsorships, but directly via that route. But I think more than likely indirectly through, if you decided to stop powerlifting, a lot of these people are coaches, and if you decide to stop powerlifting, they may be either coaches or they have a business which sells something.
Yep.
If you decide to stop powerlifting, how relevant are you now to that clientele base or to that customer base? So now is it really your choice to stop? Some people are still going to say yes.
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
That's a big risk.
Yep.
Yeah. Dude, but I feel like this is so, and I guess this is something personal, but like, so Ben's injured. Ben hasn't done a meet in how long?
God, I don't know, 3 years.
3 years.
Right.
But Ben's got somehow magically a full book. And I don't think it's by magic. I think this sounds like such an economic model to me. Like, it's because like LS and we always say this. We're like, man, like, let's just eat. When we say eat, it means everybody. Like, if we do good, people are like, yo, I want to sign up with this dude Ben. And we're like, right. Yo, who's this dude? And like, that's the thing. It's all a big thing. So it's like, it's kind of slick. Like, he doesn't even have to compete. Like, we'll keep the money rolling in for him, you know. Yeah. But it's like, so many people don't have that option. So like, there's this thing. You took economics, right? Macroeconomics.
Yeah, a little bit.
Did you ever take economics?
Mm-mm.
There's this thing called I forgot what it's called, but it's like this model they use. Like, you ever heard of like the guns and butter model? Basically, it's about like
I remember that.
Yeah,
but I don't
like guns and butter is basically like it's basically an opportunity cost model. So it's you map it on this curve. It's like the possibility, like production possibilities frontier or something like that, and then it sets out like, okay, with all of my variables, like, what am I capable of producing? You know what I mean? So like, if you're capable of, and let's do this for something relatable in powerlifting in time, like, what do I need to be like? So what do I need to be doing? So like, let's say guns in this case is, actual lifting weights.
Yeah.
And let's say butter in this case is, I don't know, like just being relevant, right? And so we see this all the time. We see people with too many guns and they're frustrated. Yep. Like, why am I not popular? Why am I not to this?
Yeah.
Why am I not?
Yeah.
And then you see some people who are like all butter.
Yes.
And that's weird. Sounds so weird. People, this dude's all butter. Let me think of someone like that. Jason Tremblay. Jason from the Strength Guys. Jason, I love you, but like, I've never discussed lifting weights personally with Jason. I've never like nothing, but Jason knows this stuff, and Jason's relevant. Like, Jason's very relevant, you know. So I think for people, like, if you map all your variables, and I know this may sound confusing, like, you have to be honest with yourself. Like, what is my maximum that I can do time wise? What is my maximum that I can do investment wise? And I think where this ownership happens is when people try to produce too many guns and too many butters at the same time. And I know it's an oversimplified example, but I know like one thing for us that we all do, and it's a new thing to me and Ben and I, is that I can't do this much today. Like, I can do this, like, this is my limit. And I think, again, it's cyclical. It ties back to, like you said, when it's sport and when it's competitive and it's very serious, people just haven't learned how to self-regulate mentally in this yet. And if you keep going endlessly with your mind or with your physical exertion or with trying to show up at a meet, and I'm trying to do this event, and I want to do this article, it's like, you're gonna literally kill yourself via letting something else own you, you know. And I think it's up to the level at which you can work. Like, I was thinking to myself this week, it's Tuesday, I think so far this week I've worked 26 hours, I think, probably already this week, and it feels normal, but I was thinking to myself, that's just not for everyone. Like, it's just not for everyone. Like, just because I can handle it, or Ben or you or someone adapted can handle it, it's no different with lifting weights. It's the same thing. And it's like, these things all sound the same to me. And it's knowing who you are. Like, that's so much of it, is just knowing who you are so that you have control of it. There's no way that you can have control of something that you don't know. It's just like lifting weights. You're not going to squat that PR if you don't know it. Like, do you know 500 pounds? Like, do you know how it feels? Like, do you know how the bar is going to move? Like, and it's the same thing with your life. And it's the same thing with this sport. Like, if you let it be totally out of control, it will, good luck. Try to squat with that. It's going to literally own you. And and I think that's synonymous to to almost anything, and well, ironically enough, know thyself was kind of a Stoic Greek philosophy. What it comes back to, well, for me, anyways, to have some sort of control over the sport owning you.
Okay, so you're basically saying like just moderate it to a point based on your own personal obligations, or your personality intrinsically.
But sometimes that's impossible, right?
Right. That's the thing I think about.
Right.
That's the difficulty, because I think if you really want to be in something, you kind of have to go too far, like, because that's the only way that you actually have relevance, right? Like,
okay.
So it's funny because I think about like Chico. Or like I don't know if he's lifted a weight in like 40 years.
Yeah. He's like, he posts pictures of like his grandkids on his Instagram. Like, I don't even know if he.
But if you produce, man, yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
So I don't know anything about his lifting career. Obviously, I'm sure he lifted at some point, or even like Ripito.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
No one ever questions if he lifts or not.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a multifaceted.
So there's something else written which basically leads into exactly what you just said. And I don't know if it's true or not, but in my experience, it seems true. Things which you really, really, really try for will always inevitably feel oppressive.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another economic model. That's law of diminishing returns.
Diminishing returns, and I think what you mentioned before is just simple opportunity cost.
Yeah, you give up everything to have that one thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, like, you might like to draw, you might like to read, but you can't do those things now because you have to lift, or, what have you. And you still got to work, too.
And I think, like, a lot of that, and I don't know why I keep hearing it in this way, but a lot of that is things we made up. Like, all of these things are, like, there's no opportunity cost in the force, like we made up all these things, like in these kind of capitalistic structure type of thinking. And I think that, like, the fact that we have money, it makes you become a hyper specialist if you want to make any of that. Like, you have to become hyper specialized in one thing, and the competition, as Darwin would put it, survival of the fittest. It's so stiff that, like, sometimes you can be good at something, and then out of nowhere, like, these new kids on the block. Like, a lot of companies are like, what are these de novo people? You know what I mean? Like, and it's because these new kids on the block are competing at a new level. So I think with that, it's ironic, because it's what I've always said a million times, because I know it's the only way that I'm able to sustain. It's play to your strengths. It's like, if I have to be that level of competitiveness that it would make most people miserable, like, what can I do that I can do at that excessive amount of volume? So, like, in my position in the company, like, dude, I can talk to people all day. I say it all the time. I'm like, it's just nothing for me. Like, I just get on the phone and I go, and I can just speak. And I think, like, if you're doing something that makes you miserable, and your cutoff point for becoming miserable is well before a national level, let's say in powerlifting, well, I don't know how much you're actually playing to your strength, right? Like,
okay, no, keep going.
Okay, I thought you were gonna keep countering me right there. So for me, like, I just use me for an example. Powerlifting has not made me miserable yet. Like, like this business, it hasn't made me miserable yet. Like, has it made me stressed? Yeah, it makes me, but that, that's anything in life you want to achieve. And, like, I think the only thing that has ever made me miserable was grad school. Like, I was actually absolutely miserable. Like, I hated it. Like, I hated everything about it. And so I know I'm not an academic, and I see Ben all the time doing his classes, and I murmur, I was like, I'm never going back to school. Like, I say it all the time. Like, I know my strengths. Like,
I think about it all the time.
I'm not, see, that's your strength. Like, you can play that. Like, yeah. I will be at 5 weeks squatting just trying to place at a state meet. You know what I mean? Like, it would kill me. I wouldn't be able to do it. But that's me personally.
That's an interesting way to look at it. Like, yeah, like what is your cutoff point of like, essentially, like misery? Like if you can get that far and not be miserable and still enjoy the thing.
Somewhat.
Yeah.
I have days.
It's
you
also
kind of have to go till you find it, though. That's the whole.
Yeah.
It's inevitable.
Yeah.
It's
the only way
inevitable
to find it. Is just go.
Man, there was something I was just gonna say. Well, one of the things that that you can kind of throw on top of this, that kind of goes along with just playing to your strengths, is that, so if you're looking at opportunity costs and all the things that you can.
Wait, can you define opportunity costs?
So basically, what that means is if there's a finite. In this case, let's use time. If there is a finite resource that is time, and I choose with my time in this case, we're talking about lifting. So if I choose with my time,
let's say it's 14 hours a day.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I choose with my time to lift,
That would be a lot of lifting.
that'd be rough.
That's most people's days, and they watch TV for like 2 hours, 3 hours.
Yeah, but lifting versus watching TV is a big difference.
All right. So if I choose for, in this case, 14 hours a day to lift weights, by essentially definition, I have chosen to do that with that time. Therefore, I cannot go to like a concert or something. I've done this, so therefore I cannot do that.
Lunch with your mom.
Yeah.
You give up something.
You give up something every time you choose to do something else.
Right.
So it's basically opportunity cost is the cost that you give up in order to do really anything.
And marginal return, law of diminishing marginal return, for those who don't know, let's say you do something for the first time you, go skydiving. And the first time you do it, you get, make up a system, you get 5 points of enjoyment. And then the next time you do it, you get another 5. And then the fourth time you do it, you get 4 points. That means for every additional one, every marginal one, it's diminished in the value that it has to you, or money or things like that. And that's what lifting is gets to a point inevitably with people. You don't get the same. It happens everywhere. It happens,
and scientifically.
Yeah, it happens literally everywhere in life. That takes repetition to, I guess, any form of mastery. But that's why mastery is so rare. If you can weather the storm, that it's not about enjoyment, and it's not about happiness necessarily all the time. It's a factor, absolutely, but it's like I always say, like, get out of your own way. Like, I have days, like we all have days, and I think to myself, like, I really want what I want. Like, do I want to be a brat about how tired I am today, or do I want the end goal for everyone in this thing? And that's what keeps me motivated, at least.
Okay.
Regardless of how I feel, like, I'm not in this to feel sad. Like, I'm not in this to complain. Like, I'm in this for end goal. Our end goal is independence, freedom, financial freedom, things like that, for those who don't know.
So I think I remembered what I was going to say, is that I think one thing that's important to consider with the model that you mentioned earlier is, like, so you said, like, how far can you go essentially without being miserable? If you can get to a very high level of sport or competition and you don't feel very miserable, then you essentially are playing to your strengths, and that's a good indicator of knowing that. So here's an interesting thing about people. Or something I've noticed, it's not very rewarding when you succeed at something that was extremely easy.
No.
Yeah.
Bo Jackson.
Yeah.
So that can be another kind of confounding problem, and why you might see more people feeling like they're controlled by their sport rather than who have, I guess you could say, a more healthy relationship with their sport, and they're able to do a lot of other things that they value. because it probably feels a lot better. And if we were talking about Lane earlier, imagine how good that must feel to know
It's
that
great.
you were not supposed to do that,
Right.
Yep.
quote unquote supposed to, but you did it. That must feel so much better than
For sure.
perhaps a person or being able to win and accomplish something that everybody has told you your whole life that, like, well, you should have done that anyway.
But if you think about that, like, dude, that's the Tao, like, that's yin and yang. So even if he has 80 points of more enjoyment than someone who it didn't take any effort for, he also has 80 points of pain that he paid to get there. So even if somebody just genetically, I don't know anything about Jesse Norris, but let's say it cost him 5 points of pain, then he's only gonna get 5 points of enjoyment. You know, I hate to put in a numerical system, but that's the best way I can explain it. And so
I like you're doing that.
yeah, there's a balance to it. So it doesn't matter. Like, what is that saying? You get in what you put out, or put in what you. I literally never use it.
Yeah, you put in, same idea.
I think you'd get out what you put into it.
You reap what you sow.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so now that you've started talking about points and things like that, so really the real question is, like, when we're talking about control and, like, having a good relationship with your sport or whatever you're doing, and being the fact that it is still your choice, the real question is, do I stop or do I keep going? And so I kind of looked up some stuff, and basically, I guess you could say philosophically, you can look at that a number of different ways. But since you started talking about points, and this is relevant, you could look at it almost from a hedonist view or a utilitarian view.
I was just gonna say that's where, like, altruism comes in, actually, a little bit. Yeah.
So basically, if you don't know, in philosophy, hedonism is basically you decide whether to do something based on the fact it's a pleasure model. So you do that which maximizes the net amount of pleasure to you personally. So if you're looking at opportunity cost and factoring this all in, does the value, whatever value you get from powerlifting, outweigh the value that you might get from all the other things that you have to give up by competing in powerlifting? If it does, then a hedonist would say keep going. If it doesn't, then the hedonist would say you should stop. So that's one way of looking at it. Yet another, utilitarian, which is similar but slightly different. Utilitarianism deals more with ethics, so you can look at that on a moral or even a societal level. So a hedonist, you're really only concerned with yourself. Utilitarianism, you could say you're trying to maximize net good or bad in totality in society. So that's another kind of weird way to think about it. Like, if you're talking about stopping or continuing on, is it moral or ethical for me to stop or not? If you're one of those people that has built up this huge base of followers, that people are looking up to you and looking at you for motivation to that degree, or information, good information, is it moral for you or ethical for you to now stop and decide that you're not going to give that to them? And does that create a negative net good there if you decide to do that? And so utilitarianism would essentially consider other people other than yourself in your decision.
Yeah, that's heavy. I'm gonna start at hedonism.
I'm I got nothing. I mean, I was talking about lifting weights. I'm out of this one.
Okay.
So I think I see people who take that sort of hedonist view, and I think most commonly, I don't have any data on this, but I think those people let the sport own them in this sort of slavery fashion that we were talking about mostly, because I actually wrote on this a while ago, and I told you, I said there are like, I've realized, at least in the United States, there are two types of people. There are experiencers who experience things, and then there are creators. And I think the creators are always a little more naturally altruistic, and altruism is born, I think, out of that utilitarian view. Altruism meaning like what's a good definition? Like, you give shit to people. Selflessness. Selflessness.
That's probably the best.
Right. And I don't think there's much altruism born out of your experiences. Like, because I think if your experience is to maximize your pleasure, and if your pleasure is things, like singular things, like I want to lift this weight, I want to do this, and it literally gives me a direct, I don't know, like some dopamine shot or something to the brain, like that's one thing. But if you're in this for the pleasure of seeing other people, well, now you have a moral view, which is constructed out of, I think, some sort of like fascist view.
We're getting our isms and
I was reading about Mussolini today.
Really?
That dude trusted Hitler. Oh my God, Mussolini. He was like, yeah, we'll bring the old Rome back. Like, why would you listen to that guy?
Nah, dude.
But I think either isn't bad, dependent on the person. You know what I mean? So like, I think naturally at De Novo, I'm not gonna lie, like, I'm totally, dude, I don't know. Like, I've been popular by myself. Like, I've traveled by myself. Like, I've done things by myself, and it was good, and I enjoyed it. But dude, before I met Ben, I was somewhat retired. I was like kind of out the game. I was like, dude, like, I'm just gonna go and work for a supplement company and kind of just enjoy my life. And like, I wasn't really interested in it anymore, because like I said, I ran out of those experiences. I've hit that diminishing marginal return. But I think I found something, and it's so deeply rooted. And I think, again, it's knowing who you are. De Novo, to me, feels exactly like my home, like how I was raised with my mom, with my brothers. Like, so like my ability to power lift, like in LS is the same way, and we're all the same with all our work. I don't think we ever think like, I have to do this so I can have some future feel good experience. Like, that's part of it, don't get me wrong, but I think the larger part of it is like, I got to do this for squad. Like, I got to do this for and I think there's a real pride in that. And I think for me, that is a bigger motivator than there are so many, and not ironically enough, having that bigger view, does two things. One, it allows you to not be owned so easily, because your ability to endure, I think, lasts longer when it's for people outside of you, when it's bigger than you. You know, that's the same way like religions run, or any organizations run. Like, it becomes bigger than you. And I think the second thing as well too, what was my second thing? First one was bigger than you. Second one was, I forgot. Well, that's not good.
So you could endure, and you can.
Yeah, and the second one was, dang, I forgot. It was good too. It was so good. I forget. The first one, you can endure. Second one, you can endure longer. Earlier. And you did this in another podcast, and you totally forgot. But the second, I can't believe I forgot the second one.
I do it all the time.
It bugs me, and then I'm gonna think about it like sometime.
You know, it was good too.
I want to find it. Sorry, guys. It was like, I was talking about, I don't know. Yes.
So, Shout out to R4.
You changed that.
Yeah.
What is that?
It was a joke. It looked like he was signing the packing slips as R4.
Oh, and he changed his Instagram name.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
I was like, what is D? It was like DNR4.
Because he was writing. He's writing his initials on them. So RA, but his A's look like 4s.
So I saw his name. So if anyone orders and you see R4, you'll know what we're talking about. I saw his name and I was like, if they call and be like, hi, I had my order filled by Rachel Augustus. I was like, dude, just write your initials, and then R4 still comes up.
R4.
That's what it became.
Packing robot R4. Okay.
Oh.
All right. So I think what you said is that, generally is that you tend to be able to endure and feel less controlled if you feel like you're doing something for a whole that is bigger than yourself.
Yeah, I think that's like evidently clear in like religion, and I don't. It's not that I made it up. I just think it's just we do well when we're not our own subjective limit maker. Like I've seen Ben work, and it's not like some theist limit that's setting his brain, but it's like I have to do this because, and then like history attached. People have always told me that blah blah blah. I've grew up looking at this way through like life and people I've known, and it's like a story that's bigger than you. Like it's so much bigger than you. And I've seen people who try to accomplish when they don't have something larger than them. And when it's not larger than you, it allows you as a single individual to say, okay, this is as much pain as I can take. I'm done here. And you can set your limit. But if you're like, nah, we've done too much. My whole history is riding on this and my whole everything. And I think for me, at least, that view makes it easy. And it's ironic because this is like a popular buzz catchphrase, like, what's your why? And you hear it all the time. People are like, what's your why? Like, what's your reason? And I think like that only applies to like people with kind of that altruistic view. And it's a play on that, what is it? Pathos of your kind of head.
So I think that I would maybe not necessarily argue, but I would posit that you definitely need a little bit of both.
Absolutely.
So like,
oh, that was my second point.
Yeah,
that was my second point.
Okay.
Can I say it?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Thank you. Wow. So the first allows you to endure longer, doing like I said in that like kind of bigger view, and then the second of that is that it allows you to do selfish things. Right. For your hedonistic pleasures. You know what I mean? So it's like if I can complete the big picture stuff, it will breed a life for me that I can be like, I personally, nothing to do with anyone else. What did I buy the other day? I bought, well, I didn't buy it, but somebody gave it to me. I have this speedometer for my bike. Like, and I'm about to put it on after this podcast. And it's like, you guys don't care about this. Like, no one cares. Like, I saw Ben today. I was like, oh, I fell off my bike. Like, and he was like, I'm never getting clip-ins on my bike. Like, and it's just something that I by myself enjoy. Like, I see you playing video games and I'm like in my head, I'm just like, that's fucking a waste of time. Like, but I'm sure you see me do shit every day. You're like, I would never fucking do that. Like, yeah. And I think that's what it allows. But I think if you purely chase that, you have no support system for those hedonistic pleasures because they're fly by night. You'll be into them for a year, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you'll go into a new phase. But I think the story that's bigger than you, if you make that powerlifting or your sport, it never dies. Like, it just never dies because it's a real thing if you make it that way.
All right.
I don't know. Maybe I should have written notes.
I think we've crushed Ben's.
We got special guest Tom. How's it going? Getting deep.
I just wasn't. Yeah. I need to start writing notes, I guess.
Dude, it works.
Jake did like low key go into like some deep philosophies that like I'm not very like recently read on. Like, I had to like think like, I know what I'm talking about. Like,
Well, when you see me sometimes in my room and it appears as though I'm watching random Yale lectures that have nothing to do with anything, this is what happens.
Yeah.
What if we both were just sitting here like...
I probably would have had this whole conversation to myself.
But that's good. It's actually good to, to still have that perspective. So I'm just literally listening.
Yeah. All right. I guess I don't know how long we've gone, but one of the more, one of the final points I had was that if it is kind of true to some extent that you have to be controlled by something, if you're trying that hard, but you can still fulfill your hedonistic pleasures enough to the point where there's a bit of a balance. So I just wrote, if you're always kind of oppressed by something, does it really matter by what? And I think you kind of answered it in the fact that it should ideally be something where this is going to sound selfish, but where regardless of, well, not regardless, but that accounts for both of those utilitarian and hedonistic goals, that it's helping everybody else and that it's helping yourself. So if you can find that thing, and I guess be oppressed by it to some degree, that seems like it would be the best, or I guess
compromise of both, right?
Yeah, the most quote unquote optimal choice.
And it kind of goes off to what Ben said earlier. He was like, how do you know? You just gotta go.
Right.
And I think so much of that, how do you know you just gotta go, is like, I hear a lot of people say things like, yeah, I don't care what people say about me, I don't care what people think. Like, I'm sure that's true, but that's not how the markets work. Like, you do something, you get a response from the people, and whether we know it or not, like, we all like positive reinforcement from the people. Like, the people will let you know, keep going, kid, keep that thing going on, and then you'll in return get better at it because maybe even one person liked it. And if people don't like it, there's simply no market for it, so you could, I don't know,
there's a market for everything,
dude, but let's say there was some dude out there on the bay, and he was doing breaststrokes every day, and we one day were like, dude, why are you out here 10 hours a day? He's like, oh, this is my dream to have people come out here and watch me. He got us. He got 3 people.
Right.
He won.
Created the market.
He created the market. He's created the market, dude. Like, he won. Like, maybe and then there's 2 things we can tell him. That's awesome. We'll be back. Or we say, dude, you're an idiot. Stop. And it's kind of fucked because both of those things are positive reinforcement, because it's like, they don't know, I'm going to show them. And then he's sort of at the same time like, okay, I'll keep it going. So I guess the thing itself is arbitrary, to some degree, because again, dude, like, ownership is a creation of society, so you have to be careful with it for what owns you and what oppresses you. Like, there's no ownership in the universe anywhere. I
wish I was Native American.
Dude, there's no owning.
Yeah.
No, they didn't even understand.
Like, I wish I could have grown up in that, and like, because now, growing up in a capitalist society, I cannot, like,
you cannot.
I don't think my brain is even capable of imagining that world.
But what if you left and went somewhere where it wasn't capitalist?
There's one country that has not subscribed to the capitalistic model in the world. Do you guys know what that country is? North Korea.
Yeah.
Go to North Korea,
dude. Everyone follows the model. Like, you don't have a choice. Yeah. Like, unless you go start up your own island, then you have to fear of Somali pirates probably taking.
Yeah, I'm scared of pirates.
But dude, that the Western culture has been colonized and implemented everywhere on the planet. It's sort of, I don't know how to feel about it. Yeah, those Native Americans and South Americans kind of had it right. Like,
yeah.
And I think Ben said it too. When he talks about chemistry, he's like, it's another world, because it is. Like, there's no ownership in chemistry, man. Like, it's team, it's borrowing, or it's bullying for a while, or it's passiveness. Like, no one owns anything. Like, dude, something can be there for a billion years, but it's always prone for something to come and change it. Like, it's there's no staticness. And I think just in Western society, we created the idea of ownership, and it's almost, ownership only exists if everyone believes that ownership exists, and we do. And I think it kind of, to reiterate my blurred lines comment or whatever statement, that's what I think it kind of touches on, is that, like, I feel that I do well in almost anything in my life because I have a very zen outlook on things. Like, with my death, with sports, with money, I'm very, like, I'm serious about it, but I know it's not mine, and it was never mine to begin with. And while I have it, that's why, like, I meditate every day. I'm like, I have what I have today, and it can be gone tomorrow. And I think we've confused it even so much in sport, property, and everything, to the point that we're like, this is mine. Like, I am the champ. I am the, like, no, dude, you were that one day of your life. You don't know what tomorrow is. So I think it's just overall in your sport, which is harder, having a healthy state of mind on what ownership itself is. Like, it's, when you think you own something, it creates automatically in that moment a codependency. Like, yeah. You two are now ball and chain. Congratulations. Like, dude, we got a nice fucking house and a nice office, but damn, we gotta work like a motherfucker to keep those things afloat. They own us. Like, I like it, but they own us, and that's just the truth. And so I think it's finding your degree of ownership, and does powerlifting, is it worth it? Like, what is your limit? And know what's more important. Would you rather have it's a Tim Ferriss example. Tim Ferriss, please mention us again. And he says this in his book 4-Hour Work Week, and I think it can be applied to kind of this podcast, is that, do you actually want to be a millionaire, or do you want to live like a millionaire? Like, I think all of us in our house and our de novo lifestyle, dude, we kind of have the life of millionaires.
Yeah, for sure.
The only thing we don't have is the stuff, like the physical stuff of millionaires. But dude, you can go to work when you want. Like, you can really do what you want to do. Like, it's a millionaire lifestyle. Like, you can avoid traffic. I mean, we just don't have the stuff that millionaires have. So for me personally, I rather always take the lifestyle itself of the millionaire and not have the responsibility of having $1 million and living like a non-millionaire. And I think I kind of do the same thing in sport. I'll take what makes me happy, and I'll also take, well, I would say on average happy most days, not happy every day. Excuse me, I don't think there's anything in life that you're happy every day.
No, unless you're a drug addict, but then that's
short-lived. Yeah,
that gets bad.
That could be.
Which is ironic. You're talking about drug addicts. Like, there's still such thing as a fitness addict. You know,
for sure. But that's when you were talking about dependency. Like,
it's just not exogenous.
Oh, yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, I've always thought that was weird when people are like, "Oh, I gotta do that." Like, I see people get like anxiety, and they're like, "I gotta run. Like, I gotta go. I gotta run. I gotta do." Like, it's like they can't get on with their day until they get that. What chemical do you get when you exercise?
Endorphins.
Endorphins. Yeah. And it's almost, I mean, it's not an addiction, but I'd say it's a dependency on it. Like, no different than coffee. Like, you know.
Or even just that, like, you only feel that you have any self-worth. Like, being able to perform adequately at this thing is
that important.
The only thing that makes you good as a person, which is a huge problem.
The lines of identity are very blurred in sports, and it's weird because I remember the time I spent in my life over in Europe. It's like soccer, and like that's about it. It's either you're a soccer player or I've never even touched a ball. I don't even like we have such an athletic culture. Like, we praise athleticism, youth, the idea of male masculinity and like these things in our culture. And I've seen like when I was like in Italy and Spain and like Switzerland, like they looked so happy. And dude, they just worked. They would work at even in Australia. Like no one really goes to college. Like they just kind of. Oh yeah, it's a cold. They work at like convenience stores or restaurants, and they just really enjoy their life. It seems, and it's like, what are we doing so wrong here with everything, with work, with sport, that we, like you said, and it was almost like an axiom. You're like, we're gonna get miserable, right? And it's like we all kind of were like, yes. Like, is that true? Like, is that an ultimate truth or a conventional truth? You know, I don't know. Here, maybe it is, but
it's a very good question. I guess it depends upon, again, like, if there is a finite resource, who is willing to go to those lengths to gather those resources for themselves?
Now I'm thinking about this actually. Like, this isn't just a podcast. Now I'm just like,
it's
I
just have thought. Like,
yeah.
I don't really have response.
Well, that's why I liked this one, was because like I wonder these things myself. Like, I have questions about this. Maybe I can answer some of them. I don't know.
Man, so the question was, do you own your sport?
Do you own your sport, or is your sport on you?
I feel like it's an ambiguous. It's not. I'm sorry. It's a. It's like a. It's almost like this weird androgynous answer. Like,
you gotta find. I guess you gotta find your right balance. Is really what it seems like it comes down to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, stop that.
Oh, what's that?
Oh, God. It's literally.
I think it's a give and take. Like, nobody at the same time. Like, nobody can take away like the things that you've done. Like, like you said something about experiences earlier, but like, one very strong thing about experiences is like, nobody can take an experience that you had from, like, nobody can take that away from you. Like, if you have done something, like and if we're talking about sport, and you've done that, you worked, like, you had to do that, and that's a very maybe not for everybody, but it can be a very rewarding feeling to say, I went through this, I put in the work, nobody else did it for me, and I won, or I met my goal. But at the same time, you're gonna have to give up. But you're gonna have to give up something in order to get that, and it's essentially sacrifice. And a lot of good things can come from sacrifice. I guess it's funny. Ben mentioned, we were talking earlier about essentially self-sacrifice. Are you willing to go that far? That is yet another question.
That's so weird you said that experience thing, because I've always thought to myself, like, I don't want to say like I don't worship experience. I mean, I don't appreciate experience, but I think for me personally, I just really, 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 like, just my personal preference, I've always admired like completion or action, you know. So like
that's an experience in and of itself.
Yeah. So I was gonna say, like, that type of experience is sort of what, like, so for me, like, I have I don't know if it's a bad memory or I don't know what it is. Like, it's just not good. Like, when I complete something, I rarely think about it. Like, I am a very present person. Like, I really can think of myself as well, who am I now? I don't think, like, I hear people say things like, oh, 7 years ago when I did this and I did this 10 years ago, and I'm like, you remember? Like, how do you remember that? Like, dude, I don't even remember I went to school sometimes. Like, I don't remember. Dude, I was actually looking at the USAPL database and I saw my rank and I was like, what? I was like, for real? I was like, oh man, that was like forever ago. Like, I just don't.
Doesn't make you feel good to look back.
I don't bring any of my past forward with me, and I think a lot of us here are probably guilty of that. Like,
that's progression, though. I mean, that's the whole human nature. That's just like saying, hey, we invented the wheel. This works. Let's just stop here. Let's not attach it to anything. Let's not put a motor there. Let's just, you know what I mean?
Oh, wow. So the progression is what owns me. The sport, I can give a shit about the sport. I don't care what the thing is, dude.
Hell yeah. Like,
yeah.
If you went in the weight room and you were doing the exact same loads every day, you would lose your mind. So I guess it's getting better.
Oh wow, I've answered this question for myself.
Interesting.
I'm a progression. It doesn't matter what it is, dude. I don't care if I ride a bike. Like, I don't care if it's I don't care the thing. I don't care what the reward is. Like, I don't care as long as that I'm seeing progression. I could be playing dominoes. Like, I don't care. Like, I need to.
Ironically, taking it back, it's kind of like being the drug addict, because it's like you're on an IV drip of positive reinforcement.
For some,
you need your drip, you need your dose. Because like I literally, as you said that, I thought about constructing like, let's just say putting together like a puzzle, and it's the same analogy is lifting the same weight, but like if you go back to the puzzle and only the frame is done every time,
right,
you're just gonna stop wanting to do it because like it doesn't feel like it's coming together.
It's weird. And then, see, again, it's one of those capitalist things, right? So I've said this a few times sort of this year to both of you guys, and I'm like, I feel like I have a disease. Like, I feel like I have some type of mental disease with like obsessiveness about a thing, and we've all kind of said it. And I say the fucked up part is that we live in a society where they call us heroes for it. You know, people are like, oh, you guys are entrepreneurs, like you went out and you did it, and I'm so proud of you, and that's amazing. And I'm listening and I'm just kind of cringing, like, I'm fucking terrible. Like, I don't relax. Like, and like, it's like we get rewarded, like we get positive reinforcement for what I really do feel like at times can be a very unhealthy activity, which is American style young entrepreneur.
That's the culture. We live in a business culture, though.
Yeah, so, and they worship it. I mean, we worship Donald Trump in our culture. Like, not all of us, but I'll look at his numbers. Somebody worships that.
Right. By the data, so if it wasn't politically infused by let's just say he's getting graded on a test, and the test was success in polling.
He's doing well.
Right, yeah. So he's doing well in a culture that worships that, yeah.
I don't want to live anymore, Jake. Yeah. Those are all really good points, though. Like, I gotta go reconsider my life now. But contrarily, I would say, what if I were not owned by anything?
Be pretty goddamn boring.
Would I have a purpose? Would I be depressed? Right. Would I have? So it's like you almost.
It's a very empty existence. That's what I was getting at. Like you kind of do have to be owned by something. Otherwise, it feels like you're not even trying at anything.
Right. So, but think about, actually, that's the storyline of the fuck is that? The comedy.
Yes.
He has a ton of money. He can do anything he wants, and he fell into the money, and people just watch it because they're gonna be like, "What's the comedy?" And if you can make it through the movie, you'll understand.
You can make it past the first
opening. Yeah. But
I want to watch that now.
But yeah, that's the whole idea. Is like nothing owns him, so he's trying to find excitement in like just doing the ridiculous, I guess.
Yeah, I don't even think that. I don't know if we're genetically set up for idleness. I think
no. That's why we have muscle. Otherwise, we'd have none.
Yeah, like I
going.
don't think our minds are made for that, because, and that's a sign of. Well, I didn't write this, but I have a book. I forgot who wrote it. It's a few authors, but it's an old book, and it's called Depression in Women. And this was about housewives. This is a very old book. It's from the early 70s. And then a lot of the studies, they showed that the depression in these women, these housewives, came from just absolute underutilization. So they would create their own problems. They just totally made things up in their head that just didn't exist because they needed a challenge. And so they'd be bored, underutilized, and they would start making things up like, I think my kid needs special needs in this because my kid is something, or I think my husband is cheating. And they would just literally make things up because your brain is, you're yearning for challenge. Like you're looking to be owned by something. You're looking to solve a problem. So obviously this is not like homeless people who are mentally ill, as most homeless people are, but they did the study on healthy brains, as far as they know, at least. Who knows, those studies in the 60s, they did whatever they wanted to. But yeah, it's weird. So it's almost like in this society, in this modern day and age, we have so much. We don't have to spend all day thinking about where the next meal is coming from. We don't have to spend, because we used to be owned by that.
Survival isn't your owner now.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like pre-agricultural, like we used to be owned by survival. Like I just need to make it through. It's a 7-mile walk to find fresh water, and then walk back.
And nobody owned, think about that. Like, being owned by survival, in a way, is probably the most free you could ever be.
That's like a Buddhist monk.
Like,
right?
You like, okay, I'm alive. Like, kind of feel like taking a nap. Like, okay, like you're alive. Like you accomplished being alive, so you can do whatever you want.
That's why I was telling you guys, and that's why I was so when I came back from Yosemite, and I was like, dude, I felt something I've never, like I 24 hours a day I was concerned with my life. Like I never felt that. Yeah. Like I was just sleeping, afraid, waking up, I had to pee. I was like, is there a bear?
Yep.
Like I was just terrified. But then I can remember when I came back and I saw, like, is this pizza? How did you guys think of this? Like there's nothing close to that out there. Like we just have so much specialization here that I feel like we can make up sort of fantasy for something to own us that's very that's not as strong as it is as survival, you know. So you pick something like powerlifting and you're like, oh, this thing owns me, so I have to do this. And I think we have that, we're like predisposed to pick something to own us, but we also have the luxury of being able to choose.
That's so basically this flips it back. So as opposed to survivalist oppression, now we have hedonic oppression.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Which is why I think I can only talk on me. I have to get real. So whatever that thing is for people, some people have to go to church and be like, okay, this is the real thing. For me, I have to stop, meditate, and be like, this ground is the real thing. Like food is, and I have to literally slow myself down.
That's dangerous though, because when you read about quantum physics, the ground isn't fucking real either.
For my subjective reality.
Right. That's the problem though, is when you start diving serially into dangerous depths.
It was 99.9% free space.
Nothing everywhere becomes real.
You're just not meant, your brain is just not meant to handle a lot of things that we know and to live a perfectly free care life. Like our brains just are not at that level yet, you know. And it's like you were saying, with a lot of the stuff you learn, it's just like it's like a gut punch on life. Yep. You're like, why? Like what? Like what? I don't know. It's like ignorance is bliss in a way.
Yeah,
gotta be a little dumb.
Yeah,
gotta be a little dumb to enjoy life. Man,
oops.
That's the perfect response.
Basically, just stop reading everything. Just enjoy
Burn
your
the
life.
books. They're evil.
Which they actually did at Alexandria. They actually did that.
Yep.
Man, maybe we would have had this problem figured out if we wouldn't have done that.
They probably read some shit. What? No! This was burn it.
People can't know this.
Yeah.
Yep.
But again, it comes back to those ideals that we have that, like I said, that we made up. Like, we believe in... I said something. I was reading something I wrote, and it sounded very... I was like... I typed, "It's my right." I was arguing like a contract or something like that. And I said, "It's my right." And I was like, who do you think you are? It's your right. Like, we made that up. Like, I don't have any rights. Like, we made up and we agreed on what we think our right should be.
That's
like,
law, yeah.
yeah. And it's just like, it sounds so insane. It's like, I was thinking about freedom. It's in itself when we talk about freedom. And it's like, is anybody actually free, or are you owned by trying to keep the freedom? Or it's like peace. Like, are you owned by trying to keep the peace? Like, is there actually any
All
peace?
made up concepts.
All pretty made up ideals.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what's that book by Plato? The Republic.
Yeah.
It's like a utopia. Utopian on sale right now. www.thenonutrition.com. Anything else?
So, I guess practically, you said, or it seems that we've at least somewhat come to the conclusion that to live, I guess, a somewhat full life that is not for an intellectual person that is not completely devoid of anything really, that being controlled or owned by something is, to me, that's probably actually preferable.
I would say mentally healthy.
Yeah, mentally healthy. And continuing on with that.
Inescapable.
Yeah, inescapable. Yeah. I was going to say inevitable, but I wasn't sure I wanted to go that far.
I think it is.
Yeah.
Like, would you make this computer, would you leave this computer up to his own devices with no program? I don't know. We should tell this thing a purpose. Like, can you imagine writing this computer, this powerful computer of your brain?
So, yeah, exactly.
And just run.
So, one thing we've all kind of gotten into the habit of doing is routinizing ourselves every day. So I was watching, I can't remember, it was on Netflix, and it was a documentary about Studio Ghibli, which is one of the like top essentially anime studios in Japan. I think his name is Miyazaki. But he had a line in the film where he said, he was talking about his daily routine. He says, I wake up every day, I walk to work, I sit down, I do my work, I do my daily routine at work, I get ready to leave, I go out. He goes out with his team every day, and they watch the sun go down. And he says, then I walk home. And he's like, and he essentially says, through that lens, I see the world. And I think when, as you said, if the human brain has too many choices, it's going to start creating its own problems. So in some way, you kind of have to put that lens on and kind of force some direction upon it. And this guy, he wasn't happy all the time. He would be drawing constantly, and he'd say, well, sometimes I wonder even why I do this. And he constantly thought about quitting. In the end, you think he's going to quit. And he goes up on stage after he releases this movie that they did, and he says, I'm going to keep doing this for 5 more years.
Yeah.
So...
Dude, it's just like a drug, though.
Yeah.
Like, It's just like the drug addicts.
I'm gonna quit. I swear I'm gonna.
Yep. It's simple as fucking cigarettes. Like I'm cold turkey, you know, and people.
It's always seems to be a love-hate. So I think practically, find that thing that you are that has the best balance of utilitarian and hedonistic ideals that gives pleasure to yourself as well as to a net good for society, and do that thing. Try to create routine for yourself so that you don't have so many options that your brain starts self-sabotaging you. There was one last thing. I think the only other thing I was gonna say is that if you feel like you want to give up, I've generally found that just stopping thinking about that, and if you just keep going, like that usually ends up being even just for my own pleasure the better choice, if you just keep going. And usually it's the harder choice than walking away.
Yep.
And the grass is always greener.
Yep. It's very good, Jerry. It's like Jerry Springer. Final statements.
Oh yeah, the closing of the show.
Yeah, that was good. It's almost like the law of the universe. Like, choose stability or choose chaos.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have to find, so yeah. Thank you guys for listening to another long one. Thank you, Jake, for confusing the shit out of Ben and I.
It was great. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of this episode, so, because I didn't say anything.
All right, we'll talk to you all soon.